You know what's really weird? It's very hard to think of any video game ending that we talk about in the same positive way as a lovable level, mechanic, or character. Most of the time, if things are going well, we're just sad it's over. Story games often come up against changing release dates or design goals, and when most AAA games are designed to be played for years at a time, the purpose of an ending is always changing. On top of this, say you're a developer. Do you tie off your story altogether, running the risk of a satisfied consumer not coming back? Maybe go with a cliffhanger, as whilst a sequel isn't funded yet, any surge of fan interaction could make that a reality. There's also the fact that development itself is incredibly hard. Budgets run out, key staff members leave, or they can have any number of emergency commitments. All of these things fold into a game's production, and the challenge of executing on an initial vision becomes substantially harder. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 9 video games that didn't know how to end. Also note, there are spoilers within. Check the description for details. Number 9, Rage 2. Rage 2 has supremely polished combat at its core, but the decision to spread that across a barren open world was met with both derision and questioning. Why, when you could have turned out a lightning-quick corridor-based shooter with occasional arena elements, did you try and chase arbitrary AAA design goals, like making the acquisition of the best weapons optional as we drove a boring vehicle from A to B and back again? Say you did buy into this design though, the ending of Rage 2 is insulting at best and downright unfinished at worst. Coming after you've been through a ton of busy work, stepping into the role of a ranger after a set of armor is left behind, you eventually find yourself in the compound of General Cross. Battling him to the death, you then succumb to a lethal virus at the same time. It's one massive set piece followed by an out-of-nowhere twist. And just as you're trying to parse out what you're supposed to be feeling and if this will lead to anything, the game slowly fades to black, re-emerging with the credits roll. Afterwards, you're immediately saved by Dr. Vasir, undoing the peril of that pre-credits twist, and you're put back to work doing the same side content, now as an endgame. Because video games. Number 8, Wolfenstein 2. I bloody love Wolfenstein 2. The shooting, teardown of BJ Blazkowicz as an emptied shotgun of a man, the liquid butter feel that sees you tear massive shapes through alternate history where the Nazis won World War II. It is all supremely sublime. Except the ending. Possibly down to this being a middle installment or something involving the game's budget running out, production schedules falling apart, etc. The reality is that Wolfenstein 2 sets up the notion that you're mounting an offensive against Hitler's forces and the systematic infection of America, finally pinning down the location of one Frau Engel. Now, keep in mind, Engel had survived being killed from the first game. She abuses her sibling, beheads someone right in front of you, and all round, she's the main bad guy in the new canon. Frau Engel is a real piece of shit, and whatever's coming her way, you bet it's going to be satisfying. Or just, done in a cutscene. As Engel is performing a chat show interview, you literally walk up to her, slice off one of her arms as the game pilots BJ instead of you, then watch the game awkwardly judder into another cutscene that shows an axe being buried in her head. Before you can comprehend that, yep, this really is how they're closing out an otherwise stellar video game, a handful of scenes show our heroes addressing the nation, as it seems the rebellion is finally kicking into high gear. Then we cut to a truly horrific version of Twisted Sister's We're Not Gonna Take It. The credits roll, and so do your eyeballs. Number 7, Anthem. Even as I read this out, BioWare are likely going to roll back another one of their previously announced commitments for the future of Anthem's story. Because back at launch, we were regaled with this idea of the game being told across various acts that would unfold across the year. The actual campaign that you played through was monumentally threadbare thanks to a hellish development process, but even that ended on a cliffhanger that a legendary member of the Urgoth race had finally been recovered. In standard BioWare form, the Urgoth are the progenitor race holding all the cards. They'd presumably cast some light on the voice of creation that is the Anthem itself, and the game rolls credits with an autopsy about to go underway. Whilst this was toothless as hell in the first place, a way to say to a community, hey, we'll think of something later, we promise, it's only become clearer that EA and BioWare never planned a full year's worth of story acts to drop in the first place. And yes, person in the comments, I did do that thing where I speak really fast and then slow down, ending my sentence like this again. It kinda seems like Anthem's entire roadmap has since been discarded and the story all but abandoned. Developers post community updates stating that Anthem is still important to them, meanwhile the game itself is dropped onto the lowest tier of EA Play just so that it can regain some revenue before petering out altogether. Slice it any way you want, I'm gonna say that Anthem is one big catastrophic misfire. Number 6, Gears of War 4 and 5. Sadly, while Gears 5 contains the most polished gameplay of the series to date, like Gears 4, it also has a marked lack of confidence throughout. Sure, there are peaks like when Kate finds out the history of her bloodline and relation to Queen Myrrah at the close of Act 2, but that's about it. Act 3 quickly deviates into a complete tonal shift as we embark on a barren open-world section, only for the closing Act 4 to be a standard save-the-city setup, and like Gears 4, the game ends on a cliffhanger that there's more to come. Where Gears 4 had the reveal of Kate realizing an heirloom passed down from her grandmother was the Locust symbol, Gears 5 has the crew look at Kate as they remark on needing to track down her mother, who has become the new Locust Queen. Both games end on Kate holding that same amulet, and both ultimately feel like wheel spinning, especially after what Act 2 looked to be setting in motion. Number 5. Control. Easily one of the best games of 2019, Control has a third-person combat system somewhere between freeform shooting and physics-based experimentation. You're free to fire off single-shot rounds and shotgun blasts, but you can also pick up everything from potted plants to tables, forklift trucks to chunks of concrete, all using the power of telekinesis. All of this is so time-tested to perfection, and yet, the ending's kinda god-awful. See, the whole game was about Jessie trying to track down her brother, who we find was taken away from her when the pair were extremely young and after they both came into contact with a supernatural entity called Polaris. Within the space of half an hour, Jessie finds out that the entity actually lives in a spherical chamber guarded by supremely hard enemies, only to discover, no, that's actually a lie and it was inside her the whole time, gets thrown into a demon-controlled flashback where she can only progress by doing menial tasks over and over, then falls into an all-red dimension where her brother needs saving all over again. She gets to the end of this gauntlet, touches and saves her brother, then he falls into a coma and we hit credits. It's all handled about as sporadically and jarringly as that sounds. And as you're allowed to keep playing, the game mentioning that there are still things to do around the facility, hinting at a true ending, absolutely nothing happens if you choose to do this. Remedy have confirmed that DLC is coming, but I very much doubt that it will fix such a shockingly naff change of pace. I absolutely love you, Remedy, but please write an ending. Number 4. Mad Max. As games continue to get bigger and more expansive in scope, you kinda have to wonder what an ending even is, when we're spending so long in open worlds and platforms for content anyway. Mad Max certainly didn't know either, as although you can argue that the character is forever on the precipice of complete insanity, dogged by visions of his dead family or never knowing who to trust, the game, after 50 plus hours of exploration, combat, crafting and customization, undoes almost everything for an ending that ultimately felt pointless. Doing the opposite of something like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, where all of your progress fed into an armor set, selection of items, and skills that you took into the final battle, Mad Max's gameplay centers on building the Magnum Opus, a deluxe death car full of weapons and upgrades, only for the game to take it away in a cutscene. Not only does the car that you've built up across the whole game get blown up, but your only ally in this land, the peppy enough chum bucket, gets impaled on the front of it as Max chooses to ram the villain's truck in the moment rather than wait it out. Of course, being an open world game, there's still a post-credits endgame, only now you're in a far less impressive run-of-the-mill car rather than the one that you'd invested in beforehand. Honestly, it's so weird. Number 3. Borderlands. The ending of Borderlands is one of the most disappointing and empty in all of gaming. The whole game being centered on chasing after a particular vault, a source of riches, treasures, and essentially something worthwhile. Instead, what popped out was a giant monster called the Destroyer. No plot or narrative reason for it to exist. Nothing especially stand out about what comes from defeating it either. Just a big oily bullet sponge monster that you could actually cheese by standing out of its reach and shooting from a safe zone. In short, it was terrible, and Gearbox would later address this decision with mission designer Paul Hellquist trying desperately to find a silver lining. Hellquist stated that although the reaction was, and I quote, stronger than they hoped, at least it didn't paint them into any corners. I mean, sure, that's some pretty damn fine damage control, and now we know why Borderlands 2's story and characters were such a massive step up. Number 2. Final Fantasy XII. Onto a game that barely survived development at all. First beginning production back in 2001 as a follow-up to Final Fantasy X, because 11 was always going to be more of an online experiment, director Yasumi Matsuno reportedly had a ton of problems adjusting to the scale of production and level of expectation associated with a numbered Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy XII was also going to debut another all-new battle system, one that would be more hands-off and MMO in nature, with you setting combat states or animations to play out ahead of time, then micromanaging how battles would play out as an overseer. This divides fans to this day, but ultimately at the time, everything combined to see Matsuno leave the project, as release windows and implementation goals were missed. By the time 12 hit release in 2006, Final Fantasy XIII was then announced only months later, having been in development for years at that point. The overlap wasn't healthy for a development that now felt like they just wanted to get it out the door, and 12's final act almost fell apart completely. With no lead creative vision and Square Enix breathing down their necks, Final Fantasy XII pivots very suddenly into a short dungeon, quick deaths, a wannabe epic battle against the Undying, and an all-round feeling of running out of time. Number 1. No Man's Sky, the launch version. Set up as part of the game's marketing, Sean Murray repeatedly noted that No Man's Sky's ending at the center of the galaxy would contain something special. And when gameplay then required hundreds of hours of planet hopping, crafting, and survival to get there, it better be worth it. What happened though? Well, you click on the final central star and nothing. Slowly, your viewpoint zooms outwards, far back past every other planet that you visited or could have visited until the game has reset itself, with all your time and progress meaning nothing. Thankfully, Hello Games have overhauled No Man's Sky's story, hammering home all the notions of purpose and humanity's need to see what's on the horizon, but for that original version, ugh. And that was my list of video games that just didn't know how to end, despite the fact that the vast majority of them are stellar until that point. Let me know your choices down in the comments below, and please check out the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.